like a microphone.
No, you don't have to lean.
Okay.
You good.
Greetings and good afternoon, everyone. The Education and Employment Committee meeting will commence. The time is now, or will begin, sorry. The time is now 3:04 p.m. At this time, I'll ask for an attendance call.
Miss Nicole Banks,
Present.
Miss Melissa Bayham,
Here.
Miss Brenda Kosey,
Present.
Miss Christy Gonzalez, Miss Meredith Jordan,
Present.
Dr. Hyacinth McKee,
Present.
Miss Bambi Polazola,
Here.
Miss Mary Tarver, Miss Vivian Webb,
Present.
Dr. Phil Wilson. Right, you have 7, so you have a quorum.
Okay, so we want to take a moment and just kind of look at the agenda before us and make some amendments to the agenda at this time. And so I'm going to ask that the committee consider modifying the agenda to include space for discussion regarding some community concerns as it relates to the recent changes in the special school district. And I'm asking that we can place that item on the agenda right after the report from the Louisiana Department of Education. Do we have anybody on the committee with any issues with us adding this to the agenda?
Can we say?
Ms. Brenda, you're being recognized.
Chairman, I said I concur with the adjustment to the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kosey. Good to hear you. So do we have any objections to this? Okay, so let the record reflect that we are going to be adding that as an item on the agenda after the report from the Louisiana Department of Education. All right, so now we're going to go right to the meeting protocols. Council meetings shall be accessible via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. Council or committee members will participate via Zoom and shall be considered present when they display a live feed video of their face with their first and last name. Have microphones muted unless called upon by the chairperson. Electronically raise their hand to request the chair recognize them to speak. Once recognized to speak by the chair, their microphone shall be turned on. After speaking, the microphone shall return to mute. Guests may participate via Zoom or observe meetings live on YouTube. All public meetings shall be recorded and may be made available on the council's YouTube channel as determined appropriate by the chairperson. Public comments submitted during a meeting via any format below shall be considered. During a Zoom meeting, guests may electronically raise their hand to request the comment. Upon being recognized to speak by the chair, their microphone should be turned on. After speaking, the microphone shall be returned to mute. Post comments relevant to the item under the consideration in the chat box. Post comments during the live stream of the meeting on the council's YouTube channel. Public comments on a person's character will not be heard. If the comment continues after being asked to stop by the chairperson, council staff may be instructed to end the meeting. The chairperson will notify the executive committee of this occurrence. Council chair will seek guidance to determine if it is legally appropriate to redact or share the video of the meeting on the council's social media. So now we'll move on to the approval of the July meeting summary. At this time, we'll take a quick look at the July meeting summary. For committee members that did not get a chance to review it, we'll just take a minute or two and go over it. So now we'll entertain a motion for the approval of the July meeting summary.
If there are no objections, then you can do it by unanimous.
So there's no objections, understanding. So the July meeting summary is approved. We'll move right on to the next item on the agenda, which is a report from the Louisiana Department of Education from Meredith Jordan.
Great. So I'll address this first item first and give you all an update on where we are with the cameras in classrooms with regard to the funding that was released. So we have distributed the legislative dollars out to school systems based on those allocations that were approved at the August Bessie meeting. And so now that that funding has been released, we have also released a collection mechanism through a survey to begin collecting school systems policies, right? So remember that the legislation called for school systems to send the department their board approved policies. So we have started that survey. Even though they have, so the law says they have until, I believe, December 15th, unless they receive funding, they're supposed to send us those within 60 days. So we've gone ahead and launched the survey to collect those. We have at least a dozen responses the last time that I checked. And so we will continue to follow up with school systems. Someone on my team will do that as we track those coming in, who we haven't heard from as we get closer. So they have until the end of November to send us in those policies, and we'll continue outreach as we get closer to that deadline, following up with school systems to make sure that we collect those policies. We are also, I believe I told you all last time, we are still working with our grants management developer to release an electronic application. So even though school systems have the funds, the funds are not on a reimbursement basis, because that would take a long time to get those funds and so that would require them to use local dollars if we had done it that way, and then requested reimbursement of the legislative dollars. So we wanted to do it quickly based on stakeholder feedback. But we are still releasing an application so that we can collect some reporting. So Bessie requested an update at the June meeting this year, June of 2023. They would like an update on how much funding has been spent by school systems and how much they have left. And so this application will allow us to collect some of that data from our school systems. So we are working and hope to have that released, but school systems, like I said, they have the funds, and we have told them to begin communicating with parents about how to request a camera, and we'll continue to support and do that. A couple of other updates that I wanted to bring to this committee. So first, I also want to thank everyone who came out to Bessie last week and showed your advocacy and support for our students with disabilities. We did, Dr. Shasa and I led a presentation to Bessie board members really around updating them on the expansive work, right, that goes into supporting students with disabilities across our state. And so we led what we felt was a short, condensed presentation, but it did take us quite some time, almost an hour, to get through that information, but really trying to educate, advocate alongside you all. So I really just wanted to thank all of the stakeholders, different groups here, partners here who came for kind of showing and also, sharing some of the work that we all do. I also wanted to follow up. I know last time this committee asked all of the ways in which superintendents and school systems get legislative updates. And so I wanted to make sure I checked with our legislative policy individuals, because I knew some ways, right? Like we, in our office, we communicate to SPED directors about, in many ways that others here do, all of the legislative work that impacts special education. But also wanted to follow up and let you all know that the Louisiana School Board Association also sends out all legislation that impacts education and students across our state. So they get updates that way. They also received a spreadsheet from our policy office through our newsletters that goes to superintendents. So they're kind of getting these legislative updates from multiple ways, right? So I think this group wanted to make sure that all legislative changes were getting out to our systems. So wanted to bring back all of the ways that happens. Also wanted to let you all know, and I'll share it with this committee. Our team is going to be releasing a survey that will be geared towards educators who support children with significant disabilities. So we are really ramping up our work to support these children in having access, having rigorous expectations. So we're going to release a survey to really get educator input on what supports they feel they need. What areas, is it assistive technology? Is it communication? Is it access to high quality curriculum? So what needs are there around those students? So I may share that with this group because I know we have a lot of reach with educators. So I'll share that with you all once we release that. And then last update I really want to talk about here, and hopefully will generate some ideas and discussion. We are leading work with a work group. Those of you who attended Bessie, you all know that the department is working to revamp our accountability system for grades 3 through 11, which includes high school accountability. And so what that system is meant to accomplish is a transparent way for parents and stakeholders to understand how their schools are doing with educating their children. And we use a letter grade system. So one of the work groups that we have formed, because there is a group that has not been considered in our accountability system thus far in our state, and that is our students with significant disabilities. How do we incentivize school systems to build inclusive opportunities, inclusive work-based opportunities for some of our students with the most significant disabilities? I'm working with other states, and there aren't other states who are doing this work as well. So I'm excited about it to kind of build on and expand some of the opportunities that the April Dunn Act provides for our students with disabilities. This will give us more incentives for school systems to include these students in some of these high school experiences and work-based learning, CTE programming in our high schools. So this is going to also be on, we're just kind of starting this discussion with stakeholders. We do have a work group, but we're going to bring this to my November SEAT meeting, also get some feedback there. And so what it will entail is school systems through accountability will be awarded certain levels of points for certain accomplishments for these students, which will hopefully incentivize them to build and expand these programs. So for example, one thing that could look like is incentivizing if a student with a significant disability attains a basic level credential. In our current accountability system, students will not, other students, right? So their non-disabled peers would not get points for that. We want those students getting advanced level. But for student with significant disability, is that an accomplishment, right? Absolutely, in my mind. So awarding school systems for giving those opportunities for those students to even attain a basic credential. Another example would be awarding school systems who have our students, even with the most significant disabilities, in a work-based learning experience. So a certain number of hours of work-based learning. So really trying to connect these students and incentivizing schools to connect these students to some meaningful employment, if that is the path, right? That IEP team, that student, their families have chosen, like to really incentivize school systems to do that and award that through our accountability system. That would be a brand new endeavor in our state and something I'm excited about it. Our administrators are excited about it. Internally in the department, I have other departments excited about it. So that's all I wanted to update, and hopefully we'll share, whenever we want to discuss or have questions, like get some ideas around that or any input here from this group.
Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. One, once y'all put the cameras in place, are y'all gonna be recording the cameras, and how long would you keep the recording for the camera?
Good question. So per the legislation, when school systems install those cameras, they must record both visual and audio. And they must store it for at least 30 days.
Okay, I have another question.
Okay.
With your child being disabled and your child is not verbal, how is it that it's road that you're just supposed to pass that child, because you're not supposed to fail no child? Why is that?
So promotion for students with disabilities is an IEP team decision, right? So you're absolutely right. So at the end of each school year, those IEP teams meet and determine promotion based on that child's goals. So that would be promotion or retention for a student with a disability would be based on that IEP team decision.
Okay, I have another question. With that, I'm not trying to hold y'all, with you got it saying, okay, we're not supposed to fail that child. We just supposed to let that child come. And you feel to parents, okay, I know my child's gonna pass, so it make it seem like it's a babysitting area. And then the teachers feel like I don't have to teach them no way, because in my perspective, I gotta pass them anyway. So one, I just got to feed them. I got to change them and make sure they eat, because I don't have to really teach them, because I'm supposed to pass them if I'm making sense. Now, if I'm not making sense, y'all tell me if I'm making sense. I feel like that shouldn't be like that. Hey, I'm gonna pass them anyway, because they have a mind. They have an ability to learn. So don't just stick them in a corner and say, okay, they're able to pass. Because it's already written, I can't fail.
Right. You're definitely speaking to something that we say all the time about rigorous expectations. I just spoke earlier at our accessible materials conference. And, just because a student is nonverbal, and we had Lynette was there, we want to see the ability in these students. And we know that that does not mean cognitively that they're not capable, right? So always holding these children to high expectations. And I think to your point, one of the things that we can do in this accountability system, even for students with low incidence disabilities, significant disabilities, is how do we incentivize, some work-based credentials, but also those students can absolutely obtain a diploma. And then how do we build in that work-based learning and provide all of those opportunities and rigorous expectations? I completely agree with you.
So I have another question. You probably say I got a lot of questions. Being as a father, and God bless my child, she had passed, but being as a father and walking in the class and just seeing her sit in a cone and you're not reacting with her, but then as a parent that she can learn, but you got a teacher sitting on the mat, twiddling on their phones, and you're not trying to teach them because you got in your mindset, hey, she gets an A regardless. What would them cameras do if they see that they're not making an effort to teach them regardless you got that in your mind?
Right. I mean, I think the school systems could certainly, there are certain individuals at the school system level that can access that video footage and see and check in on those classrooms for sure, to kind of check that. But I would also say as well that, administrators, principals, we train them to constantly we should be giving constant feedback to teachers. We should have constant feedback cycles. We are revamping our evaluation system right now to move away from this idea of a once or twice a year classroom visit evaluation system and communicate and support those leaders. They should be walking around constantly to check for those and seeing those things. And then how do I support that teacher in a growth mindset, believing in that child that they can, and doing their job, right? So I think that is a part of that. I would be saying, like, where is that school building level leader who should be walking and constantly monitoring and providing ongoing feedback to those educators to provide the right supports.
Okay, one more question. I feel like the child that got beat in the class by a teacher, and I'm for the cameras because you beat a disabled child. And you beat her because you weren't capable of taking care of her, or handling her. I'm for the cameras. I'm glad they're making a step for the cameras because everybody is not for these. Everybody's not for taking care of a disabled child because she can't respond or he can't respond. So yes, I think it's a great job that they put in the cameras where you see a person you could put a teacher in and she could be a teacher. But is she walking a real walk as a teacher? If I'm making sense, but I think it's a great job, but I just had them questions, see what they gonna do more with the cameras. You could put them now, but the recording and the watching and the knowing, hey, they getting to learn because they can learn too.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for DOE? Melissa?
Thank you. I just wanted to remind you, Meredith, we actually, one of the 5 required pre-employment transition services is work-based learning experiences. But we have to make sure that we coordinate our
Mhm.
efforts. Because if something's required under an individual's IEP, we can't supplant funding. But that's part of that statewide MOU is if we coordinate the funding, we can make it work. I know DeSoto Parish is doing an outstanding job with work-based
Yes.
learning experiences. They're even connecting it and helping them with money management and things like that. And they actually use our pre-employment transition service funding to pay those students. So just,
And I think hopefully what this will do will incentivize that to occur in more school
Yeah.
systems.
because we're still, we're using our funding, but we get funding every year, but we have 2 years to spend it if we have to. But we're having to use those 2 years because we're not spending enough funds. So
Okay.
this,
This will help, will hopefully
if that makes sense.
incentivize it
Mhm.
and this will be really good for this partnership and for us to
Mhm.
help incentivize them to
Right.
reach out and use that and use those models. Yep.
So I'm so glad you brought that up, Melissa, about coordinating. And I'm just overly exhausted. So I think we're gonna be at this point where I think the DD Council is gonna have to make a little bit more steps to ensure that there's some real coordination going on between LRS and LDOE. We have been asking this for 2 years. And I don't know where we need to get this going. I don't know if the LADDC, what we can do, write a letter, maybe I can have some conversations with the staff. Every time we have a meeting, there is some type of like Melissa sharing with you things that they are already doing, right? And had that been a coordination, then you would already be aware of that.
I'm aware of pre-eds and
Right.
We're trying to incentivize school systems to have that partnership. And we're
Right.
working on an MOU together right now. as
Yeah,
well.
so how long is the MOU gonna be working? This is like 2 years. So every
Mhm.
time I come to a quarterly meeting, I bring up the same question about where is there a liaison? Where is there some type of coordination between LRS and LDOE? The public asks that all the time. we have parents that call us constantly. I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know this could happen for my child. Why this individual hasn't been invited to my child's IEP. My friend knows that the LRS is out there. He's getting the services, but no one even invited an LRS person to my child's IEP. These are simple, basic requests that our parents and our community ask every single time we meet. So I'm going to be on record again. Where is the liaison? Where is the coordination? Where is the work collaboration between LRS and LDOE? You said there's an MOU. How long does it take for the MOU to be drafted? When will the MOU be put to place? Because our parents and families have been asking for this, to my knowledge, for 2 years. And so it's like every time we come to a meeting, so when is the MOU? So was that like, is it written? Is it in drafted form? Is it just conversation again? It's drafted, okay. And so the next question would be, is there any support that's needed from the LADDC to ensure that the drafted MOU actually materializes into something that our parents can have, and utilize for their kids? So what would be the next step? So it's drafted. Is there something that you will need from LADDC to make sure that it happens? Like, what would be the next step? Is it something from us?
I mean, if there are any suggestions, I'm open to a motion, anything that can help us, get out. We're communicating out to school systems, their regional contacts, that this is required. So this is one next step, is to provide some accountability for school systems to take that step, right? So I think this will be one way to help that, and I'm open for ideas for sure.
So like and I can't speak for LRS either, because I know LRS they have a work shortage, right? And the LADDC has drafted support to help ensure that they get more people that work. Is there an opportunity to recommend a possible liaison between a position that is a liaison, that individual, their sole responsibility would be to serve as the liaison between LRS and LDOE, like, appoint a staff person or that will funnel through some department? That would be a recommendation. And if I'm overstepping, committee members, just let me know. But LDOE is asking for recommendations, but I think getting that MOU, it's in draft format, getting it to where it can be reviewed. Maybe you can get that MOU over to us, our stakeholders, so they can review and provide feedback, just like we got the Bulletin 741. So maybe getting that MOU over to us, so our stakeholders can provide input, and then also drafting it in such a way where there is a position that is someone that can do that work to be a liaison between LDOE and LRS. Bambi Palazzolo recognized.
So I'm just wondering, what is the MOU?
Yeah.
But actually, this is being discussed, Melissa. We've been talking about it for 7 years now. I know, at least since I've been in position, but I know we've had change of administration at LDE.
Right.
So, we can't go back to just the past 2 years. I'd like to see some progress, but what is the MOU that you're creating going to do?
Yeah.
Because I know it's different, because you'd have an MOU potentially with school districts individually. So what is this MOU with the State Department going to do?
So we had an MOU, but it expired. So now we're trying to update it. So, we sent the MOU to DOE, and now we're just waiting for their feedback. Now, this particular MOU, it depends on, and how do I want to say this? With LRS, we have control over our funding, and it's a little bit different with the Department of Education. So I know in the past, the last time we negotiated the MOU, which was some time ago, because it was a 3-year MOU, I know some difficulty we had was, I can't remember which word the department had to use. I think it was encourage. Like, we could not put a lot of teeth into it. So I'm not sure if that's still the case or not. And that was one thing when I didn't realize that y'all were doing some work-based learning experiences. That could be something maybe with that we could put a little bit more teeth
Mhm.
into the MOU. Because a lot of it is just some of your standard, what the department is going to encourage the school districts to do, which would be to, allow them to participate in pre-employment transition
Right.
services.
Yeah, so like it's, they have to apply and agree, have that agreement with LRS. I think the accountability piece, right? So like you think of a couple of things that encourage school systems to do things: funding, policy, accountability. So I think like having an accountability system where they are going to receive points in their letter grade system for doing this, like that's another like set of teeth that's never been there. So to say, okay, I'm not gonna stick these students in a corner and not give them any opportunities. I'm gonna give them opportunities because now in accountability, the State Department is highly encouraging me to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something we can look at adding in here.
So I'm hearing that the question is what's in the MOU? What would the MOU do and how would it support our families? I mean, the bottom line is how is it getting to our families? And so I'm hearing, like I said, again, the MOU, looking over the MOU, we are requesting again that you guys work to coordinate with each other, possibly consider developing a position. Someone at the state level who could serve as a transition coordinator or someone to be accountable for what's happening to our families and our districts. And so that is the request of the LADDC Employment Committee. And I don't know if anybody else have any other comments about that. I bring it up every quarter, because we get parents with the same questions. Go ahead, Melissa.
I know in the past, like we have we're required to have a transition coordinator. So in my office, I have a couple. And I know in the past, when I was in that particular position, at that time, it was Rebecca Hanberry was in that role. So does that role not exist anymore?
I have someone who's working on transition, but she's also working on my work for students with significant disabilities. So I have a person who will support this, and like we're working with LSU to get some transition partnerships for school systems, that kind of thing, helping them build these programs. So I have somebody that can be.
Is that Megan? I can't think of her last name.
It's Lauren Miley, Dr. Miley.
So do you know if she's been in touch with anyone from my office?
So probably not yet. She's been here for a couple of months.
Okay.
So not yet. But I know we have Megan who serves on your on the commission as well. So we're coordinating with her, getting that information from your commission too.
Okay, well, thank you. So it would be fair to ask that we get a full report on those efforts in terms of the transition coordinator or liaison at the next Education and Employment Committee meeting, which will be in January, a report on those efforts, as well as the MOU. All right, any other questions for the Department of Education and their reports? Thank you so much, Ms. Jordan, for your report. Is someone
We do have, yes, ma'am, Dr. McKee. We have Ms. Karonda Corley. She has her hand raised and a few comments that she listed in the chat.
We'll allow for public comment. They can unmute themselves. I don't see a hand raised. Oh, okay. Ms. Corley, you're being recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Education Committee. Okay, first and foremost, Ms. Meredith Jordan misspoke. This BESA meeting that the SBLC would have decision-making authority whether or not our children with IEPs would be retained in school, not the IEP team. It's the SBLC team that would actually have that authority. Second, what is accountability gonna look like? Because I know that there is an emergency accountability meeting that is taking place on November 10th at the Claiborne building. But we have not been given a time yet, per the Bessie. And children with disabilities, as well as English language learner children, are one of the priorities that will be addressed. Our children with disabilities are not being addressed, especially as it relates to the accountability framework. And our State Department of Education always like to say that they do not have the power to implement and enforce. So when we talk about if we want real true accountability, it needs to be put in this framework that's occurring on November 10th, that I noticed that Ms. Meredith Jordan did not tell everyone about. But it is an emergency meeting. Also, we may need to look at legislation regarding what this is going to look like as it relates to cameras and everything else, because the policies, LDOE stated that the policies are not due until December. But Senator Mizell stated that the policies are due the beginning of November, 60 days after receipt of the funding. The school systems have already received the funding. So they had 60 days from that date to actually have their policies. If they do not provide their policies, then they are in violation of the law. And there are plenty of legislators that would like to address that violation. But it has to be that our DD Council is willing and able and wanting to make sure that accountability really get addressed and that we actually hold their feet to the fire. Because this is how our children are constantly falling through the crack. And that is why the School for the Deaf and the Blind have more problems now today than they ever did before. Thank you so much.
Are there any other comments from the public at this time regarding the Department of Education's report?
Yes, ma'am. We have a comment from Ms. Brenda Baris. How are the school systems held accountable to create a camera policy and implement it? When will the systems policy be developed and implemented for the 2019 Act 117, which allows ABA therapists in the classroom? The laws can be passed, but if school systems policy are not created, then nothing will happen.
Ms. Jordan, would you like to address that for the public?
So based on, they should have policies in place already for the act around ABA therapy and allowing those outside therapists in the school systems to provide those services. Like she mentioned, that law was passed several years ago. And with regards to the camera policy, they should have those adopted or quickly adopting them for the school systems that have received their funding. And we're collecting those now.
Any other comments or questions? Look like we have a committee member with her hand raised. Is that Vice Chair Banks?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Banks, you're being recognized.
Thank you, Dr. McKee. Okay, so I'm reading the legislation and it says they have like no later than January 15, 2023 for each governing authority to submit a copy of the policies and adopt to pursuant this section to the State Department of Education, correct? So we technically have to give them until the 15th at the latest to enforce, to really enforce it by law, because we have it stated up in here, it was no later than January 15th that each one should submit a copy. So even though they've received the funding, they still have some time for the ones that, kind of dragging it and, maybe they can't figure out exactly how to get all of the policies in place. They still have until the 15th. So I know the 15th is like right around our January meeting, right? So when the 15th comes and we have our meeting, and for all of these districts that does not have a policy in place, what are we going to do as far as a corrective action? Because something has to start doing, because Dr. McKee said it perfectly earlier. She has been talking about this for the last 2 years, about getting something, you know, concrete in place where we have something measurable and obtainable to see that things in progress are being made. So what is going to be the corrective action for these school districts that are not having the policies in place after the 15th of January?
I can bring, that would be a perfect time for me to bring sort of, if you want me to bring a report on who we've received those reports. Hopefully at that point, it's gonna be 100% of them. So I could bring that for our January meeting and we'll know who's out of compliance and who's not. If that's helpful.
Did you hear that, Vice Chair Banks? That
Yes, ma'am, I did. I heard it. So after we find that information out, do we have something that's already in place as far as a corrective action? What's going to happen to these school districts that doesn't have this in place? Because then we gotta wait another 3 more months for it to happen, because that's when we have our meetings. So I'm just trying to, you know, get the ball rolling before we even get there.
So your question is, what would be the consequence if a district did not adhere to the bulletin that's in front of us? What would be the
Correct.
consequence?
Yes, ma'am. What would be the consequence? What's the corrective action? What happens to them?
A good question. Any other comments? Vice Chair, thank you for bringing up that point. Any other comments from?
Yes,
Public?
ma'am. Ms. Karonda Corley has her hand raised again, and we do have one comment in chat.
Ms. Corley, you're being recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I want to express, and I'm expressing this also to Vice Chair Banks. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely wrong. They only have until November. Cade Brumley, who is the superintendent for LDOE, as well as Senator Mizell, they spelled it out. They read it out of the law. It's in the law, 60 days after they receive the money. If they don't have their policy, they are in violation. So why would we want to give them until January? That's the problem. We always give them an exception. Children are getting abused. Children are being violated. I got a call while I was on this meeting about a child being sexually mishandled. Today, we can't keep delaying a camera because they failing to create the policy. The law says 60 days, they gotta be held accountable. And we need to hold their feet to the fire. That's why I made sure I brought up that it's an emergency meeting that Bessie is having on November 10th at the Claiborne Building. And they're gonna be addressing children with disabilities and English language learners in the accountability framework for every school system in this state, including charters. We cannot keep letting them get away with using our children as punching bags or anything else in between. It's not acceptable. And we can't, they don't give us parents a slap on the wrist or let us pass by the wayside. And I'm not about to let them pass by the wayside neither, because I am an African-American mother and I will get reprimanded 3 times worse than a white woman. And I'm not about to sit back and say it's okay for them to actually be able to not have their feet held to the fire and be held to the same accountability that I will be held to. Absolutely not. That's my recommendations. DD Council, please send a letter in regards to what they're gonna put in the accountability framework for our children with disabilities, as well as the children with disabilities that are English language learners for the November 10th meeting. That is my recommendation. That is my request. And that is what I'm requesting, not just on behalf of all the individuals with disabilities, but also on the basis of my child that is nonverbal, that has multiple disabilities. Thank you so much.
Any other comments regarding the report for the Department of Education at this time?
We have a statement from Ms. Brenda. She stated, however, policies are not in place for the Act of 117. This is still not allowed to happen. Ms. Nicole Banks also posted to the chat Title 28 Education Part CXV, Bulletin 741 of the Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, detailing the information. Each LEA shall adopt policies relative to the installation and operation of cameras that record both video and audio in classrooms. 1, the policy shall be adopted not later than December 31st of 2022, or within 60 days of the receipt of funding for the installation of cameras, whichever occurs first. Number 2, not later than January the 15th of 2023, each governing authority shall submit a copy of the policies adopted pursuant to the section to the State Department of Education. And number 3, within 10 days of any revisions of the policies, each governing authority shall submit a copy of the policies to the department. And that concludes all comments. I'm sorry, one more comment. Good afternoon. Please say full name for the record. There are attendees with the same first name. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Brenda Kosei. The comment came from Ms. Brenda Baris.
Thank you. Any other comments or regarding a report from the Department of Education at this time? Okay, we will move right on to hear the report from the Louisiana Rehabilitation Services.
I'm sorry, Dr. Hyacinth. We have 2 more hands raised. Ms. Melinda Elliott have her hand raised, and Karonda Corley has her hand raised again. I'm sorry, Ms. Karonda lowered her hand.
Ms. Elliott, you're being recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Did I understand correctly that at the next Ms. Meredith, did I understand correctly that at the next meeting, you're going to bring us a report of who's turned in their policies and who has not?
We did, and probably because you weren't sitting right next to us, but we did talk about making sure that we will have that full report at the next meeting for the Education Employment Committee to review.
And
I'm
that's
sorry,
in-
we didn't state that, probably didn't state it loud enough for everyone to hear.
It's okay. And that's in December or that's in January?
Well, our next meeting is not till January, and of course, that's some of the concerns that our families are bringing to our attention, because our meetings are quarterly. And so, you know, there's things that occur in between those times that we just, we're not meeting to discuss. And that is the concern, the timeliness. And I believe our vice chair made that as a concern as well. But we did, yes, ma'am.
And I guess I'm trying not to be angry, right?
Yes,
But I
ma'am.
mean, abuse is still going on. I have a parent talking about the abuse of her child on Facebook here, not 3 or 4 days. I am concerned about waiting all the way till January. But even if we have to wait for January, I would be interested in seeing the report. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your comment. And then to speak to that, Ms. Elliott, I think we also had some dialogue a few meetings back asking what the Department of Education's stance and policies were as it relates to reporting of child abuse or reporting abuse, and what was the DOE's position on that. And I think that was maybe about two or three meetings ago, like what was the position on that? Because we are getting reports from families that their children are being abused, right? And so that was another, point that our families brought to our attention as well, to echo what Ms. Elliott and also Ms. Corley's concern about the timeliness of everything. Do we have any other comments from the public at this time?
Ms. Karonda Corley stated that the DDC need to bring back LaTeach. And that's the only comment.
Do we have any other comment?
Ms. Karanda Corley also just stated LDOE has to provide the information to the Senate Education Committee before they meet with us.
And in that emergency meeting, Ms. Corley, they should be bringing that report at the November 10th meeting. Is that correct, Ms. Jordan?
The November 10th Bessie meeting is an emergency called meeting to talk about the accountability framework for school systems and how we award letter grades to school systems on schools' performance around students. So it's a very specific meeting, if I recall correctly. And they have not really, let me check to see if they've released it. I don't believe they have. But I can share it as soon as they did. I can share it with the committee as soon as they do. Nope, an agenda is not released yet.
So I just want to point out to the public that's on the call, we hear your concerns, we hear your passion. Certainly, we do not want any child to be abused or any family experiencing that. We are hearing your concerns. We are working to the best of our ability to address it. I think this is a big start to require that we get that report from the Department of Education as to what districts have not followed the law. And in terms of adhering to the special education classrooms, the Department of Education said they will supply that to us at our next meeting. Any other questions or comments for the Department of Education at this time? Okay, I misspoke and I was handing the baton over to you, Melissa Bayham from LRS, but actually we're going to get the report from the Advisory Council for Student Behavior and Discipline at this time on the agenda. Is that correct?
For the special school district.
Oh,
Is that where you?
That's what I wanted. Special school districts. Sorry, y'all. We're trying to keep up. Right now, we're going to hear discussion surrounding the community's concerned as to the recent changes in the special school district. And we want to allow some space to discuss that. Do we have any committee members that want to start dialoguing about that and then allow the public any opportunity to speak?
So Dr. McKee, I'll share that there has been concern for several weeks, months in regards to some situations, and this is just things that I've heard in regards to situations of staff members feeling, especially those who have disabilities that are on the staff of that school, feeling intimidation by leadership. There's been a change in leadership. There's been a lot of issues. Legislation a couple years ago changed the special school district from being from underneath the Department of Education to having its own school board. It's very new. And so there was some of these allegations that have been kind of ongoing. And I think it culminated this past Friday with the firing of the School for the Deaf administrator, who is a woman who is deaf, who is a doctor with, I think, certification in deaf education, so highly qualified member of the deaf community. And so there has been like a really outrage, is how I would describe it, from the community and from the parents of the children there. So the Louisiana Commission for the Deaf has consulted with the Department of Health attorneys in drafting a letter to the Special School District Board, who's the one who has to investigate, really urging them to investigate all of the issues that have been brought before them. And so I would propose to the Developmental Disabilities Council since the Commission for the Deaf has gotten this approval from the Department of Health attorneys, and what capacity legally can they respond and I guess advocate that the DD Council consider signing on to that letter with the Commission for the Deaf to really just to express our concern as well, because this population, many of the kids there are students there are members of the developmental disabilities community. So that's what I know, and that's what I would propose for the council to do.
Do we have any public comment regarding, thank you for that report, and then I'll circle back to you when the committee makes that decision. Do we have any public comments regarding this matter?
No, ma'am, not at this time. I'm sorry. Ms. Karanda Corley just posted the emergency meeting will address the following. Number 1, students with disabilities and English language learners. Number 2, CTE. Number 3, funding. Number 4, SPS. Number 5, award for diploma. And number 6, incentive for social economic disadvantage.
Thank you, Ms. Corley, for that information. May I ask you, where are you referencing that from? Is that, can you point us in a direction as to where you're referencing? Is that a agenda that's out there? And I will recognize you to answer that question.
Yes, Madam Chair. That was courtesy of the Bessie Board meeting that the Department of Ed recently held on October 11th, 2022, which was a Tuesday. The first meeting, which was Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. That was the committee that actually was posed with the task of speaking on that. That conversation dialogue was a little longer than 2 hours, and Bessie Board member Preston Castile, along with the Bessie president, James Garvey, actually asked for 6 topics that they will address in the accountability system framework for the emergency meeting on November 10th. And they listed them during that meeting. And those were the ones. They also talked in that same meeting about the SBLCs, the SBLCs being provided the governing authority to retain children, even if they have an IEP. And the issue dealing with the Bulletin 1530 revisions, that was a consent item, so it didn't really get any dialogue, but that passed, and the minutes for that is not reflective of how the meeting actually ran.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments about what Ms. Polozola mentioned with the special school district? Ms. Polozola, do you want to motion, or do you want us just to make a recommendation that we sign on to the letter?
Yeah, so I'll just make a motion that we recommend to the full council that we sign on to the letter that the Louisiana Commission for the Deaf intends to write to the special school district.
There's a motion on the floor made by Ms. Polozola. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Motion made by Bambi Polozola, seconded by Vice Chair Banks. Any objections? Any abstentions? Any public comment?
Can you repeat I'm sorry, can you repeat it? I'm trying to type.
No.
You took all the repeat. Reason, go.
That I recommend that, the committee recommends to the council to sign on to the letter that the Louisiana Commission for the Deaf will send to the special school district regarding investigating investigating the list of concerns.
Brought forth by the stakeholders or family. by the community or stakeholders? Or you want to just leave it out? Just leave it out. Just leave that out because
Yeah, because
Leave it
it
out.
could be employees.
it could be anything.
Parents.
Just leave it out. Yeah, list of concerns, period. I don't mean to modify it. Because it could come from anywhere. And it was seconded by Nicole Banks. Okay, and it was, motion was passed. I didn't hear any objections. Did I call for it? Did I say any objections? Any objections, any abstentions to the motion? And we got the public comment, hearing none. All right, motion.
Ms. Karonda Corley has her hand raised.
Is it related to this motion? Because if it's not, we have this motion is still live on the floor. This is related to the special school district. Is there a comment related to that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so we still have this live motion. If there's no.
Oh, I'm
she's
sorry. She
saying
said
yes.
it is. She said
Okay,
it is.
all right, we will allow it. 1 minute, Ms. Corley. You're being recognized.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm gonna be very quick. I'm in favor of this motion, and also I would like to recommend that if we can disseminate information out using LaCan of any actions that the special school district may do, such as a protest or sit out or sit in, that the stakeholders would like to be able to participate in, that information be disseminated out as well. That was all I had to say in regards to that. Thank you.
So that's on the record. It's not part of our motion, but it's been heard and it's on the record. So I hope that folks are tuning into our meeting today. All right, with that being said, the motion has passed. Okay. All right, so now we are going to move to the report, right? For the Advisory Council for Student Behavior and Discipline.
No, it's at the bottom.
Where am I? Because see, I'm looking at the printed out, and that's the old one. See, I'm not looking at the one, okay.
So it'll be after the contractual updates.
Okay, to be after the contractual
Yes,
updates. Okay, so that's, all right. So now we're gonna be getting the report from LRS, correct?
Yes.
All right. That's okay. I'm looking at the other one. All right, report from LRS.
Thank you, Dr. McKee. I have two big thank yous today. First, to the council and this committee for the letter that was written to the Civil Service Commission regarding our recruitment and retention issues. I just want to thank the council for that. As y'all know, we did receive a response from Byron Decato acknowledging that he received it. So I'm really, really glad to see that. So thank you so much. Also want to say thank you to Rashad Bristow and Healthy Blue, who sponsored and helped us host a virtual job fair on October the 12th. It was very successful. I have some statistics on the job fair. We had 39 employers and 96 job seekers that participated. 59% of registered job seekers attended. We had 220 chats, 85 candidates were considered for the future. 44 job seekers were screened will be screened further, and 5 interviews were conducted. It was done using the Brazen platform, and we were just really excited about the turnout and hoping to do it next year and it being even bigger and better than it was this year. So thank you so much. 2 other updates. We had the Disability Innovation Fund STEM Up grant with Southern University, where we are assisting individuals with disabilities to either obtain employment or to advance in employment in STEM occupations. And I'm happy to say we're getting to the point where Southern University will begin to recruit for the career pathway coordinators, which will be the coordinators that will be assisting our clients one-on-one using social cognitive career theory and using those interventions to assist them in their efforts in employment in STEM occupations. And last but not least, I just wanted to report that we are in the process of writing an RFP to do rate setting for our employment services. Luckily, this is a hot topic in vocational rehabilitation right now. So I think I'm not going to even try to guess. There was a certain state that actually sent out their RFP. So we were able to kind of use some of the language in their RFP, which was very helpful to expedite the process. So we're in the process of getting that done. Hopefully it'll be out soon so that we can begin that work in rate setting for our employment services.
Thank you for that report. Any questions from the committee for LRS on the report? Any questions from the public regarding the report from LRS?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you so much for your report, Ms. Bayham.
Thank you.
And now we will move to the report from the Advisory Council for Student Behavior and Discipline. I know y'all are there saying, what's going on? These people don't have their act together over here. We had some printout issues. So now we're gonna move to the report from that Advisory Council for Student Behavior and Discipline. For the record, the agenda is posted on the website accurately. So I just want to put that out there. All right, that would be from our Executive Director.
Thank you, Dr. McKee. So the Advisory Council on Student Behavior and Discipline last met on Friday, August 19th. At that time, presentations were heard from the families and friends of Louisiana's incarcerated children regarding student experiences with school discipline. And then the Advisory Council deferred a discussion regarding annual planning and evaluation. And then the final piece of business that was voted on was electing a new chair. The new chair of the Advisory Council is Ms. Karonda Corley, who was on the call. Prior to that meeting, the last time that the Advisory Council made a quorum to be able to conduct business was in February of 2020. Since I started, there were 3 meetings that were attempted, or I guess kind of held. November 5th, 21, December 16th, 21, and then April 7th of 22. And none of those had a quorum. Like I said, they hadn't had a quorum since February of 2020. So there hasn't been a whole lot of movement within the Advisory Council for quite some time, because without a quorum, you can't really move business forward.
Any questions for our Executive Director on the report for Advisory Council for Student Behavior and Discipline from the committee? Any questions from the public regarding the Advisory Council for Student Behavior and Discipline? Public.
Ms. Karonda Corley has her hand raised, and also Ms. Nicole Banks.
Okay, Ms. Banks, you're part of this committee. You'll be recognized first.
Thank you, Dr. McKee. So to my understanding, we haven't had a quorum for this particular committee since 2020. Did I hear that correctly or no?
Correct. Since February of 2020 was the last time that they had a quorum prior to their meeting that was just held in August.
Okay, so let me ask this question. If there's no movement that's been going on and there's no quorum that has been had for this committee, are they going to dissolve it and just give the responsibilities to another committee so that this can get taken care of, so the issues do not just disappear and just get swept under the rug?
No, I believe the intent is for the Advisory Council to continue to exist. But that's.
So is it a reason why quorum wasn't had? Because I mean, we can go virtual. So is it like a technology issue or?
Well, that Advisory Council is run by the Department of Ed. And I believe that the Department of Ed is not offering any virtual or hybrid options for any meetings.
So can we send out a recommendation that they consider start to have their meetings in a hybrid option for people, because that's 2 years and now we're going on 3 years that the committee haven't even met? That's not acceptable.
So I have a question. So Vice Chair, I want to add to your concern. So let me understand if I can piece this together. A quorum has not taken place since February of 20. During that time, we were in a pandemic, and the Department of Education did not allow for virtual or hybrid meetings, to take place so this advisory council could meet. So during the pandemic, there were no exceptions made. Am I understanding that correctly?
If I remember correctly, there was one of those meetings, maybe, that was hybrid. I may not be remembering that correctly, because I believe they were all in person.
Yeah, we did have the ability, some of our seat meetings during that time, if there's a emergency order, then we did. We're not allowed to now at all, the
Right,
department.
right.
But some were at that time, so I'm not sure why.
Yeah, at the time, I think they might have attempted to have some, of course, I don't know what happened prior to when I started. But they pretty quickly moved back to in-person, and it was 100% in-person, no virtual option.
During the pandemic.
Before the public health emergency was over, yes. The governor declared public health emergency.
Okay, but then under that public health emergency, the option to hold meetings in person, virtually, was not afforded to the advisory. They still were required, just in layman's terms, they still were required to meet in person, even though we were under a public emergency.
Mhm. I do think that if I'm remembering correctly, I believe the November meeting might have been virtual, but I want to say the December, and then for sure the April meeting were in person.
All right, do we have any public comment here? Regarding
Ms. Rhonda
this?
Corley has her hand raised.
Ms. Corley, you're being recognized.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so to correct Ms. Banks, no, this council cannot be dissolved because it was established by Louisiana Statute 17, Eseque 253. There are representatives from Louisiana Association of Educators, the Louisiana Federation of Teachers, Southern Poverty Law, the Louisiana Association of Public Charters, Louisiana Center for Children's Rights, the Disability Rights Advocacy Center, etc. It is 29 people, 29. This council met April 7th, 2022, and did not have a quorum. They got a quorum because I came to the meeting in August. And that's how I became the new chair. The previous chair was Ms. Gina Womack, who is the executive director for Friends and Families of Individuals Living Incarcerated, also known as FLIC. In the next meeting, and in this previous meeting, we talked about Louisiana Act 563, which addressed adverse childhood experiences. We also talked about Louisiana Act 697, which was authored by Senator Katrina Jackson and Representative Thompson, that's talking about bullying and policies that LDOE and all of the local educational agencies have to put in place. We talked about how we're gonna measure success to reduce cases. There's also a task force that deals with student behavior, discipline, and mental health that is chaired by Representative Denise Marcel. The co-chair is Ms. Alma Stewart Allen, who is the executive director for Louisiana Equity. They disseminated out, they came into existence due to House Resolution 173. And they just disseminated out a questionnaire where everyone would remain anonymous to actually receive information about the school systems and what discipline and behavior realistically look like, not just for children with disabilities, but for all children with disabilities. And so the next meeting for this council is December 8th, 2022 at 10 o'clock a.m. at the Claiborne Building, which is also the building that Bissett holds their meetings. And there will be a quorum because everybody has already committed. It is open to the public. Making this meeting accessible virtual is something that we are addressing. LDOE is in communication right now addressing that. And we are trying to make sure that any person with a disability can attend without having to request the accommodations. That is something that we're trying to make sure is addressed by this council. Now, that task force is actually having a meeting on November 10th as well at 10 o'clock a.m. And that will be at the Louisiana State Capitol Building in House Committee Room 1. So I do ask that if anybody wants to attend those meetings, those two meetings are open to the public. I encourage our individuals with disabilities, families, and advocates to speak up because your voices are not being heard. And there is another questionnaire that will be disseminated out asking for stories of individuals with disabilities as well as regular children or typical children to be able to express what has been their issues or what problems have they been faced or posed with as it relates to student behavior and discipline, so that this council can actually help with creating a master plan for LDOE to implement and for all local educational agencies to actually have to adopt. And if you have any questions, I am always welcome to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Corley, for your report. Thank you, our executive director, for your report as well. For the meetings, do we have our executive director attend those meetings on our behalf for LADDC, correct? Is that, you attend those meetings for that?
Yes, I will not be attending those meetings.
Moving forward?
Yes, moving forward,
Okay.
I'm moving that one along.
Okay, and so you'll be assigning someone from the staff to attend those meetings
Yes, ma'am.
on the behalf of LADDC.
Yes, ma'am.
Staff moving forward.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding that
Yes.
report?
Yes, ma'am. We do have one comment from Ms. Cynthia Posey. Per state statute, teacher groups are required to have a classroom teacher as their appointed member. It's very hard for a classroom teacher to consistently attend a meeting on a school day.
Thank you so much for that comment. And we look forward to hearing all of the work that this advisory council is doing moving forward. The LADDC will have an appointed staff person that can share reports with us about the status moving forward. So just wanted to put that out there for everyone that's listening. And again, thank you for your report. We're going to move right on to the employment, education, contractual activities update from Ebony, Seminars on hiring individuals with DD from Ebony.
Okay, so if you guys have your blue packets, there's the status of planned activities in there, and that's where this update will come from. It's activity 3.2.2. It can be found on page 26 of the status report. The final webinar was held in June 2022. And O'Neill Communications is currently working on post-production ideas, which actually includes them distributing clips from the employment seminars throughout National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which is this month. So they released their first clip yesterday. It was posted on the council's social media. It's entitled A Message to Employers, and there will be other posts throughout the month for National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And they just took clips from those employment seminars that were very, very good. And then they're just making small posts for this month for National Disability Awareness or Employment Awareness Month.
Any questions for Ms. Ebony Haven on this report? Any comments or questions from the committee or public at this time?
No, ma'am.
All right, hearing none, we'll go on to the LaPi report from our executive director, Dr. Glenn Becker.
Yeah, I'll give the report today.
Okay.
So the Louisiana Post-Secondary Inclusive Education Count, I'm sorry, let me back up. If you're looking at your status report, it's activity 3.1.1. And that covers what LaPi has been doing. But the Louisiana Post-Secondary Inclusive Education Advisory Council was created, and they conducted their first meeting in August of 22. And that advisory council came out of the legislation that funded the development or the creation of more of these programs or the enhancement of some of the existing programs. So we have had a number of, even 4 meetings so far. And LaPi is working on drafting applications for funding so that higher education institutions can apply for these funds to either help develop a new program or to expand an existing program. So they've been working on that. They did draft surveys of, it was sent out to all of the public higher education institutions to get some data on existing programs or the interest in developing these types of programs. And there was some pretty significant interest, which is very exciting. And then in addition, LaPi has been providing some ongoing technical assistance to Calcasieu Parish School Board and collaborating with McNeese State University and Suella Technical Community College in Lake Charles. And they have a phase 1 initiative that begins on both campuses of fall 22 and focuses on 18 to 21-year-old students. And it uses IDEA funding. And then their phase 2 will be to develop post-secondary education programs on both of those campuses. And they have also met with Louisiana State University, the Baton Rouge campus, who also has some interest in developing a post-secondary program. And so they've just been helping with some background information, some technical information there too. Some very exciting things happening.
All right, any questions or comments from the committee regarding the report on LaPi?
Yeah, so I attended the meeting as well and worked very closely with Dr. Beckers and everyone that's involved with LaPi. And one of the things at the meeting that as the council, is it called a council?
The advisory council?
Yeah. As they were discussing how to divide up the money, like what would be the amount allotted to these universities, which as Amy shared, there's like 12 higher ed institutions really helping to meet some of the demographic and geographic things that we wanted to happen. The money really doesn't provide, $1 million doesn't provide for like longer term investments. So you could potentially, give an allotment that the school needs for maybe 1 year, but like to make these plans, they really need like 2 or 3 years of sustained funding, you know, because they're hiring a staff person with the money. They need to be able to plan that out to sustain it for a while. So I would propose that in our legislative advocacy, that we would include asking for additional funding. And I know last year, originally, we were asking for 3 million. I think we need to go back to that 3 million and make the request that is needed, because we have this interest, we have some things that are developing, but we need to be able to look at it like on a 3-year basis. And I think 3 million would help to achieve that. So that's my recommendation, that we recommend to the council on that legislative advocacy agenda for funding for the LAPI in that LAPI fund.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
I know, like, this group, you kind of could be like, is that a motion?
I think I
So-
can repeat it if you need.
So, yeah, Ms. Polazola, y'all LaPie people. I'm a LaPie person too. Y'all is slick. I love y'all advocacy. We brought that up earlier today, but okay, I'm liking it. So we have a motion on the floor, to bring this to the full council, to add, the request to advocate for funding for sustainability for LaPie. We're asking for 3 million. You know, LaPie's bold. They started with 40 and they went to 1 million, and now they want to ask for 3 million. And that is, but I understand the need for the expansion, because now we're at 12 universities, and you know, and so that's the motion on the floor, to bring that to the full council for consideration, to add that to the legislative agenda, advocacy legislative agenda. Is that what I'm hearing, Ms. Polazola? That's the motion on the floor. Do we have a second to that motion?
Am I adding it to the advisory council, or is it just?
To the
for-
fund.
It's their fund.
It's to their fund, it's the sustainability, because it's not, I mean, it was written out of good faith to really get them started, but it's, when you start talking about high ed, it's not enough.
I'll second it.
You know, so we hear a second from Eric down there. Eric, let me get your last name again.
Mr. Taylor.
On the committee.
Oh, it's not appointed yet. Well, no, you hadn't decided what committee you wanted to be on anyway, so we're not even. We need someone that can second. Now I know which one. Do we have a second then? Because we can't receive it from Mr. Taylor at this time. Do we have someone that's gonna second this motion? We don't hear a second, then it will die. Okay, so that's who? Is that Vivian? Okay.
It was.
All right, it was. Thank you so much. Any objections? Any abstentions? Any public comment regarding the motion?
Ms. Karonda Corley has her hand raised.
Ms. Corley, you're being recognized. Ms. Corley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just out of, just being, as an inquiry, would
Yes.
this, 3 million, keep the DD Council from disseminating the 40,000 that they already commit to giving, 30 or 40,000 that they already commit to giving annually? Or would this be 3 million in addition to that 30 or 40 million? Because I am aware that at the meeting on November 1st, as it relates to LAPI, they're supposed to bring, the universities have to bring back what sustainability is gonna look like. And I know that it's going to cost a lot of money, but I don't want it to be that we say 3 million and it actually be more. So can we like put something that say additional funding, but don't put ourselves in a box by saying the 3 million? Because if it's 5 million, then we want to make sure that we can push for the 5 million. And that's if Bambi wants to, amend her motion.
That's something to be considered. Ms. Polazola, well, how do you feel about that? Do you want your motion to stay at 3 million, but what if we needed more? Do you want it to stay at 3 million? Do you want to amend your motion?
I mean, if we can get the legislature to put whatever amount in it, I'm not gonna be the one to stop
Right.
it. I mean, I
So,
think 3 million would get some, if you look at it from three years out. Go ahead, Brent.
okay, all right, we still hear you, Ms. Corley, and now we're gonna, defer to Brenton. He has a real comment to add.
I was just gonna say for the 3 million, so you always want to put a dollar number in there because you have to have an ask, right? The legislature is gonna want to know what you want.
Much.
The 3 million is there in the bylaws. You give your executive director the permission to change any of your agenda based on needs and what comes up. So if we realize that we can get more money or less money, whatever it may be, I don't think you have to change the motion is what I'm saying, because Amy could always, pending information that we gather later, we can look to get more or less. So I think it's good to have a dollar figure in there, but know that we have a mechanism in place where we can change what we need to ask for later.
So I think that it speaks to both points from Ms. Corley, as well as, and thank you, Brenton, for adding context to that. I think, you know, they're gonna ask for an amount. You just can't kind of go to them with. So for starters, if we have the 3 million in there and it looks like we may need to ask for more, we will do so. So with that being said, and to address Ms. Corley's question about the 40,000 that's already allotted, that contract will be up at the end of the year, for the 40K.
So yeah,
So-
this 3 million wouldn't even be tied.
It
to
won't
that.
be,
That's-
thank you.
That's our contract. So
Right.
this is something that Bambi wants to add to the legislative advocacy agenda, which is not tied to the council's action plan, which is where that 40,000 is tied to.
Come from, right.
Yes.
So it would be, Ms. Corley, to your point, up to the DD council to decide whether or not to remove that funding and allot it for some other ask or contract or whatever when that time comes. But they're not tied together. They're not tied, but you know, thanks for bringing up that point. But again, that will be up to the council to decide if they would want to continue to give it that 40,000 or in our next action plan. Hearing that, if there's no more public comments, this motion has passed without any objections or abstentions or comments, you know, any objections or abstention. Where are we now on the agenda? Thank you for the reports. Now we have the report from, is Kelly on the line? Kelly Monroe from Customized Employment Training? Hey, Kelly, you have the floor.
Hey, guys, sorry. Yeah, so we have our last class. We had 25 people registered so far, and it was pretty much everybody who registered so far has attended the other training, the other gateway. And so these people, once they complete this last training that we're doing, they will also receive ACRE certification. So I'll have those final numbers for you next time of everybody who completed ACRE and then everybody who completed the certification and job development and discovery. But this is the last class that we're doing. Not sure if you remember, we did decide that we would not move forward with this contract next year since we were having a hard time getting people to work with. And then also since HDC was also going to be doing it, there was no way we were going to have the individuals to work with in both contracts. So that's pretty much the update. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but this was something that was so great for so many staff who attended. And so I appreciate you guys funding it for as long as you did. And hopefully, they'll be able to carry on through HDC.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee regarding the report from Ms. Kelly Monroe? Any questions or comment from the public regarding the report?
No, ma'am, not regarding the report, but Ms. Karonda Corley, she did place in the chat that the LaPie next meeting is November 1st of 2022 at 10 a.m. in the Claiborne Building. And HR 173 created the Louisiana Student Behavior, Mental Health, and Discipline Task Force. Their next meeting is November 10th, 2022 at the Louisiana State Capitol in the House Committee Room 1.
Can you say that, read that what's in her chat again about
Yes,
that
ma'am.
task force? I did see something and I wanted to ask someone from the DD Council about that and the status of that. Can you read that again?
Yes, ma'am. HR 173 created the Louisiana Student Behavior, Mental Health, and Discipline Task Force. Their next meeting is November the 10th of 2022 at Louisiana State Capitol in House Committee Room 1.
Is LADDC part of that?
We were not, no, we did not have any seats on that task force. Bambi, are you on that task force? Not that one?
We did just share like the questionnaire that they
I
have
remember
out,
seeing the
Dr. McKee,
questionnaire,
yeah. And we can start to share, like, if that's the request of the committee, we can start to share their meetings as well for stakeholders that want to participate.
Just to ask, is I'm wondering why LADDC wasn't considered to sit on that.
I don't,
Do we
whoever
know?
drafted the,
Whoever drafted it, probably didn't think to put us. All right, thank you for that information. Any other questions or comments? I just think, I'm just wondering why DDC is not on that. Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding, the report? All right, hearing none. I am going to, adjourn this meeting today if we don't have any other questions or comment. All right, so I don't think I need a motion to do that. The meeting is adjourned at 4:41 p.m. Thank y'all for the participation and guys enjoy the rest of your day.